All right. Hi, Mom. How are you?
I'm doing fine. How are you, Jen?
I'm doing wonderful. So my mom has been a teacher at Methuen High School for how many years now?
15 years.
Long
Very
time. Teaching high school math. So I'm really excited to be able to ask you a couple questions today in regards to some of the stuff I've been learning in my class. So we'll just kind
okay.
of run through them. It's going to cover a couple different topics. And you can just, yeah, we'll go through it from there.
Good. All right.
Okay. So my first question for you is, what is one thing you find critically important in keeping students engaged?
So I think the first thing we need to do, like in the beginning of the year, is establish a good relationship with the students and then get to know them and encourage them to not only work with me, but also work with each other. So you just learn their strengths and their weaknesses, and you scaffold throughout the year, allowing them to, okay, maybe they're not talking as much and there's one in the classroom, but you scaffold those others until they're all about at the same pace and all collaborating by the end of the year.
That makes total sense. I love that. That's great. And then, given the current situation and the classroom being more virtual, kind of along the lines of engagement and stuff, what has your experience been like in creating an environment that is still able to reflect diversity and encourage constructive interactions among your students?
All right, so I did get a chance to do a 100% remote class in the summer, and to encourage engagement, I think that the best thing to do is just wait a couple of weeks, speak to them individually, talk to them with kindness, build a trust relationship. And I noticed that in the third week, they started helping out each other.
Oh, that's great.
Need.
Yeah.
As diversity, I think that's just built into my school system as one of the most diverse communities in Massachusetts, if not the country. So that's a built-in, and that's one of the strengths that my school has, because students are accustomed to it and the cultures are blending. So
That's great. Yeah. So, I mean, it's a lot from the two questions about building the trust and building the relationship with the students.
yes, very important.
And then my third question would be, what do you find the most challenging in regardless to new technologies, standards, teaching materials? I mean, this is a perfect question for you because I know you just came off teaching a class in a completely different way. But how did you kind of adapt and learn through that?
Well, I think the first thing that I've loved about 19 years of teaching is that it's ever changing. I will be really honest, my personality, I would be very bored if this remained the same. So I think that it's actually been a great challenge, but also understanding that the students are challenged, and in the beginning, keep it simple, give them careful instruction, show them where the resources are so that they feel comfortable with the online learning. And also be very open to practicing it on your own and asking a lot of questions. So a lot of times this past year, since COVID began, I've been in both the role of student and teacher. And that's a really helpful thing to help them feel comfortable. Oh, I'm learning technology and so are you.
Right, right, absolutely. And along those same lines, what measures do you take to keep yourself up to date and educated? Technology and all that sort of stuff included.
All right. So first of all, I love collaborating with other teachers, especially younger ones like yourself who come, well, out
Almost.
of almost
Almost.
out of grad school, and they have a good background in the technology. They're more savvy in it because they grew up with it. Um, can you repeat part of the question again? Can you just say it again? I just want to be sure.
Oh, yeah, of course. I said, what measures do you do to keep yourself up to date and educated?
Okay. Secondly, I think that is a blessing in disguise that in Massachusetts, you have to take every 5 years at least 3 graduate courses, and that's how I keep myself up to date, collaborating with colleagues and also enjoying the time taking graduate courses, whether it's in pedagogy, whether it's in math, or whether it's in those special needs or our L population.
Gotcha, gotcha. And then, How do you gauge the pace of teaching the subject matter to include different styles of students, like different learning styles?
Okay. This is a challenging one.
That's okay.
Classroom. I think that the best thing to do in the beginning of the year is, I was always taught in grad school, be absolutely yourself because I have a certain way of learning. But then listen to your students. I think that's one of the most important things, that they are not just direct instruction, go and do practice, but rather listen and you can hear the different styles and also give them different choices of how do they present the work.
Right.
But also let them know and keep in mind, I know where you're heading in your education. Some things are solid. You've got to learn, as in a math class, how to do the algorithm, how to justify your reasoning. You have to learn the vocabulary. But just make sure that you have a lot of enrichment activities, whether it's projects, applications, collaborative learning, very important. That would help those types of students.
Mm-hmm. And kind of along those same lines, can you just give me an example of a time you had to quickly adjust your instruction to fit a student's needs?
Yes. Okay. So I had a student that came from a different country, and they had been in the school for 4 days and transferred to the honors pre-calculus class because she tested out, even though she was very young, she tested into that class. So the way that I quickly made adjustments with her is to immediately collaborate with the director of our L students and guidance, and then talk to them about, we have textbooks that have the audio, and we also have glossaries in different languages. But I also went to them first and said, okay, help me out. I see her L plan. What classroom to support her? So I think that's the first line. You've got to work with the team first and then talk with the student. Because the first day I always ask them, could you stay out for a minute? Tell me, what are your needs in the classroom? How can I help you?
Love that. So just keeping an open line of communication with the students to figure out what it is that they need.
Yes.
Let's see. How do you involve your students in their own assessment and goal setting?
It's transparent, their progress as far as different grades. As far as measuring their own progress, most of the time, I'll just give a quick example. I could say a lot, but most of the time, I have, if they did not score well, say on a quiz, and I will do this for the entire class, I'll ask them this question. What did you do to prepare for the quiz that worked?
Mm-hmm.
What would you do differently? And that just gets them to reflect and think about, okay, yes, this is a grade, it's part of school, what could I have done differently? Or what worked for me? Was it studying with someone else? Was it practicing problems?
Right.
They reflect and assess their own progress.
Okay. This is one that I was very interested to hear what you had to say. So one of the things that we were reading about was talking about, how education and the goal of education has changed. So do you believe that school systems are getting worse, or do you think that the goals of education are just changing?
We talked about this earlier, and I did agree with you that I think what's happening in the workplace is that the skills and knowledge that students need has changed and evolved. So one of the greatest things that happened, I was very excited about, called 21st Century Skills, is when companies actually put together and said, these are the skills we're looking for, such as collaboration, that's a big one.
Mm-hmm.
These are the skills we're looking for in the workforce, and we're not seeing it yet. So that's a big part of what we talk about and how we've pushed, education forward. However,
Right.
I think there's tremendous gaps in education as far as you cannot walk into any school, such as schools in Finland, and receive the same education. And that's what's really lacking in across the country. There are some schools that are supported, and I'm not just talking about resources either. Some schools are supported by the community and supported by the Department of Ed, and many, unfortunately, are not. So I think that's something we really need to work on.
Right, right. That totally makes sense, especially with what you were talking to me about schools in different countries and things like that, that documentary that you watched and everything, you know? Okay, let's see. As you juggled the many responsibilities of being a teacher, have you ever found yourself overwhelmed, and how do you cope in these situations?
I have. Yes, I have. I think that one of the best things, and I was part of a professional learning community.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the younger teachers said, I feel overwhelmed at work from 7 to 7. And I understand the first 3 years are usually like that. But I also told them that once in a while, maybe every 10 days, you're going to have to give yourself the afternoon off. And I literally said these words, and you're not a teacher that afternoon. You're a bike rider, you're a mom, you're a wife or husband,
Mm-hmm.
an instructor, you are something else, and you give yourself a break. And I think it's very important to be open with the students. Talk about that also. Another resource is going to your department head or building a good, solid network with your other teachers. They can often give help in that situation, and that's what I relied on. I have good friends that I teach with that have helped talk me or walk me through that.
That's great. And kind of along the same lines, you know, we did this project where we talked about kind of different buckets in which hold all these different strengths or things that teachers need to do, things they need to know, things that they need to act like, and things they need to care about, right? And one of the things that we talked about was focusing on strengths, like our own strengths as teachers, while, you know, kind of self-correcting, but understanding that, like, you have weaknesses. You can't be perfect. You can never check off all of the boxes. So what tools do you utilize to kind of have self-correction with maybe some of the weaknesses that you may have?
So one tool, and it's worked very well in remote learning because we're all new to this, is actually send a Google form to students and ask them, how did your teacher help you? And what would you have done, or what would you have wanted to see differently? So that's one resource, is that you can also, you know, talk with your students, and they will self-correct you. I love high school students. They will say, no, don't get that. That again, or could you slow down? Sometimes I tend to go about 90 miles an hour. And could you slow down? So that is a way. I think that also our evaluation process is excellent in Massachusetts, where the department head views me several times a year. We also have mentor programs where other teachers, the system, they give me feedback. If I'm in a grad course and I need to evaluate or, you know, observe a class, we have a lot of good feedback from that. So those are the ways I try to think about, okay, how could I do better?
Right. Let's see, what's the next one? So kind of shifting gears a little bit more towards kind of classroom and the diversity and everything like that. Obviously, I know that things are a little different because they're virtual now. But, you know, we have discussed things like bullying and race and all this other stuff. So what tools do you use in the classroom to ensure that students have some sort of level respect for one another?
Well, I think first and foremost, as we talked about, building that trust relationship. But I think that teachers have a great responsibility modeling kindness.
Yeah.
And modeling their acceptance of their students and their colleagues, wherever they are in the building or outside of the building, even at a sporting event, in a kind, open, build a relationship. And I think